I am driving to Bedminster, New Jersey. It is 6:10 in the morning. Clear weather. End of May.
Controversy surrounding it.
The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is a new entity. It involves American contractors, and instead of having food distributed in hundreds of points across Gaza, this group is going to be restricting that to 4 new zones, with Israeli soldiers guarding the perimeter and private contractors giving out boxes of food to families once a week. And it says that it's begun distributing its first food boxes at one site yesterday, and it's going to be ramping up activities. But all the major aid groups in Gaza and the United Nations are refusing to cooperate. Jake Wood is the U.S. Marine veteran who directed the group. He abruptly resigned just as they were getting started. He said the plan cannot follow principles of humanity and neutrality. And there really is not a lot of transparency about this group, Michelle. A private U.S. security company run by a former CIA officer is involved. It's posted a job posting online saying they'll train people on the job, and the group won't say where its funding is coming from. Israel's opposition leader is alleging that Israel is secretly funding the group.
So many questions about this group that aren't being answered, but the U.S. and Israel are backing it. So tell us more about that. Like, why is that? What's the goal here?
It's really an idea that was devised by Israeli military veterans since the early days of the Gaza war, to separate civilians into guarded zones, to feed those civilians, and to starve Hamas. Now, Israeli officials have also said publicly that the aim here is to get Palestinians to move south near Egypt as a step toward moving people to other countries. Israel's allies in Europe say that would be forcible mass displacement, and they oppose it. And Hamas is warning Palestinians not to take food from this new U.S. So it puts Palestinians in a really difficult position. They're starving. They're telling us that some would refuse to take part. Others, they're desperate, and they would go get that food.
So before we let you go, can you briefly update us on ceasefire negotiations?
There does seem to be some movement toward a temporary ceasefire and a hostage deal. There's been a flurry of statements from Israel and Hamas yesterday and today. An Israeli negotiating team is expected to be in Cairo today, but it is too soon to be optimistic.
That is NPR's Daniel Estrin in Tel Aviv. Daniel, thank you.
You're welcome.
For more about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, we have Ahmed Bayram. He's a spokesperson for the Norwegian Refugee Council, which is delivering aid in Gaza. He joins us from Amman, Jordan. Ahmed, the last time we spoke to your organization a few weeks ago, you said that you were out of aid completely, and that you just had water to give out. Is that still the case? Do you have any supplies to give right now?
Pretty much the same situation, of course, with the suffocating blockade that we are facing. The Norwegian Refugee Council has not managed to bring in any aid as of this morning, since of course the blockade was installed. Now we are running down our latest, our last stocks of shelter items and of baby items. We are still providing water, which is a critical lifeline at the moment, but the numbers are shrinking, and so we need the gates to open for aid to gush into Gaza so that we can help.
Now, we just heard about the U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Have you or any of your team on the ground seen or heard about its operations this week?
No, we haven't. I mean, of course, there are some reports circulating on social media. We haven't heard or we haven't seen, mainly because, Israel has reportedly installed these distribution points very far from where it has displaced people. It's these points, 3 out of 4 of these distribution points are in Rafah. Rafah, by the way, is 100% off limits. It's a combat zone. It means it's a no-go area for civilians. So for Israel to actually place a distribution hub for aid, miles away from where it has obviously displaced people is a big question mark to start with. And of course, there are, in the meantime, there are tons of food trucks waiting to move into Gaza. So I think what's happening is a big distraction. We should go back to, looking at these aid trucks that aid organizations are waiting to offload for people who really need them in Gaza.
So not even a picture or a video of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation?
I mean, there have been reported images of that organisation or of trucks. I've seen some images today of a few people carrying boxes of apparently what is food support. It's not clear where exactly. It's not clear who these people are. Like I said, according to Israeli orders, you're not supposed to be in Rafah or anywhere near it at the moment. So it's not very clear, I have to say. Everything is murky at this point when it comes to this organisation. And I think the wisest thing to do now is to reverse this plan and allow food to go to the heart of where these communities are in the north of Gaza and in the central of Gaza.
But Israel's government says that this new way of delivering aid via the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is necessary to stop supplies from getting in the hands of Hamas. So what would be wrong with that?
Well, it would be. Not getting probably this plan would not get aid to probably over 50% of the people at this stage, simply because it has no plans to offer aid to people north of Gaza. It has no plans to offer aid to where people actually are in displacement camps, in the center, in Rafah, Khan Yunis, and in Gaza City. There are thousands and thousands of people. Baker is already there, and I have to say here that organizations provide aid in the midst of these refugee and displacement populations on a daily basis. We go to people and we offer that support. The plan, what is quite unrealistic about this, even dangerous, is that it will require people to walk miles, through landmines, through, being screened, obviously walking in probably the most dangerous routes to get a bag of bread and then go back. I mean, that is going to be, dangerous. So, yeah, again, we want this plan reversed.
Quick, we've got 20 seconds. So what did you make of Jake Wood's resignation as the head of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation?
I think it literally shows that the entire idea is a non-starter, really.
All right, that's Ahmed Bayram, spokesperson for the Norwegian Refugee Council. Ahmed, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
The European Space Agency will transmit a live performance of a classic piece of music into space later this week. NPR's Rebecca Hershey reports this is, in some ways, a fix to a decades-old omission.
In 1977, NASA launched a space probe called Voyager 1 and included a mixtape of humanity's greatest hits that could theoretically help extraterrestrial life understand us. Music and science journalist Timothy Ferris produced that mixtape and spoke to NPR in 2017.
We were gathering a representation of the music of the entire Earth. That's an incredible wealth of great stuff.
Ferris ended up including a wide variety of music, including a jazz performance by Louis Armstrong and a classical piece by Mozart. But another Austrian composer, Johann Strauss, didn't make the cut, even though his waltz, titled By the Beautiful Blue Danube, had recently become synonymous with space travel after it was featured in the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. In the movie, the swaying orchestral music plays as a spaceship docks with a space station, with the Earth in the background.
In 1977, humanity sent 27 of its greatest songs into space. The Blue Danube by Johann Strauss II was left behind on Earth. In 2025, Vienna is going to correct this mistake.
That's from an advertisement produced by the Vienna Tourism Board to promote this week's broadcast of the Blue Danube Waltz. On May 31st, the Vienna Symphony Orchestra will perform the piece, and the music will be converted live into a high-speed electromagnetic wave. A European Space Agency radio antenna in Spain will beam that wave into space, in the direction of the Voyager 1 probe, which is now far beyond the edge of the solar system. The Blue Danube transmission will be moving so fast it will reach the Voyager probe in about 23 hours. From there, the iconic space theme will keep going on and on and on into the cosmos. Rebecca Hersher, NPR News.
Woof. This is NPR News.
And this is WNYC in New York. Later on Morning Edition, corporate America once made much of how very invested they were in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI efforts. Hiring people helped them meet goals around it. Now they're running the other way and laying off the people they hired to do that work.
This isn't the same environment that it was years ago. And it's been pretty tough.
More on how many jobs have been lost, that's in about 15 minutes on WNYC.
WNYC receives support from
Atlantic Theater Company, presenting the world premiere of Low Country, a dark rom-com by Abby Rosebrock, directed by Joe Bonney and starring Jodie Balfour and Babak Tafti. Performances begin June 4th. Tickets at atlantictheater.org.
On the next Fresh Air, James Patterson, one of the best-selling authors in the world. An estimated 400 million copies of his book sold. That includes the Alex Cross Detective Series, The Women's Murder Club, and Maximum Ride. He's collaborated on novels with Bill Clinton, Dolly Parton, and a starting one with Mr. Beast. Join us. Weekdays at 2 on WNYC.
Morning Edition on WNYC. I'm Michael Hill. Thousands of New Yorkers live in what's called supportive housing. 58 and sunny right now, partly sunny, mid-70s today. Got a little ahead of the game there, calm wind. Then tomorrow, chance of afternoon showers, cooler in mid-60s. I'm ready for us to tell the news to you. I'm ready for us to tell the news. Weather's part of the news, too. It is 6:21. Thank you for tuning in this morning.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Progressive Insurance, where drivers can compare direct rates using Progressive's rate comparison tool. Customers can see options and rates side by side. More at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. From the Kauffman Foundation, providing access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity, regardless of race, gender, or geography. Kauffman.org. From Workday. Workday is an HR and finance platform for forward thinkers, dedicated to propelling organizations, workforces, and industries into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward. And from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
It is Morning Edition on WNYC. I'm Michael Hill. Thousands of New Yorkers live in what's called supportive housing. Those are subsidized apartments for vulnerable people like those who have recently been homeless or who have mental illness or addiction disorders. And they come with support such as counseling, job training, or case management. But tenants and their advocates say the same landlords who are paid to help them are too often suing to evict them. And they say many of those cases are preventable. Joining us now to explain is WNYC's Karen Yee. Karen, first of all, good morning. First, who is supportive housing supposed to help?
Good morning, Michael. And this is really a model that has exploded in the last 2 decades. So nonprofits are contracted by several different city and state agencies to house New Yorkers who, like you said, are the most vulnerable and coming from homeless shelters, have a mental health illness, or are struggling with substance abuse. And they need additional support to live independently. So along with housing, they're supposed to provide additional support through different kinds of services. There are 42,000 of these units citywide, and it's successfully kept thousands of New Yorkers with a place to live that they can afford because they pay 30% of their income toward rent. But there's also dozens of tenants who are at risk of losing their homes. This isn't something that has really been systemically tracked before, but now Legal Services NYC, and they offer free legal representation to low-income residents, they've started compiling a list of cases to show that in many cases it's routine practice for some of these landlords to try and evict their tenants.
What do the numbers tell us?
Well, in the last 5 months, nearly 300 tenants had an eviction warrant issued against them by a judge. This gives a marshal the okay to evict someone from their house. So most are for unpaid rent. And so far, at least 52 people have lost their homes. Now, these numbers are likely to undercount because on any given day, as many as 400 marshal's notices are issued, and it can be hard to determine which are supportive housing units. That's partly because in some cases, landlords aren't telling the court that they're suing a supportive housing tenant. And tenant lawyers told me that this is a big problem because judges won't know the tenant could have a mental health illness and could have trouble getting to court or could need extra time or could need maybe a guardian ad litem to properly defend themselves. Craig Hughes is a social worker for Legal Services NYC. He says the consequences of putting these tenants through eviction court are devastating.
They're going to end up in the shelter system. They're going to end up on the streets. They're going to end up in the homeless system, and it's going to take them years if they ever get out.
Hughes says most of these cases shouldn't happen if tenants are actually getting the support they were promised and are paid by the city or state to deliver. That includes help securing public benefits that can help them pay their rent. So he says providers should be doing this instead of turning to the courts to compel residents to pay up or leave.
How do supportive housing providers, how do they explain these evictions?
They tell me that it's a painful choice, but they say it's a rare one. But they also say that part of their job is to keep their buildings running and to be landlords. Tenants sign leases when they move in, and they agree to pay their share of the rent. And sometimes that can be as low as $200 a month, but if that's not paid over many months or many years, it can add up. Some providers tell me they're facing a historic amount of rental arrears since the pandemic. They need that money to make sure they can provide the services they're contracted to and help the rest of the tenants that they serve. But the other thing they told me is that evictions have also become a way to get the city to release emergency assistance for tenants. So when they file an eviction notice, it sends a tenant's application for rental assistance to the top of the pile, so it sort of fast tracks it, is what they tell me. But the city was adamant that this is not their policy, they do not encourage this, and that a tenant does not need an eviction on their record to be eligible for rental aid.
And what is the experience like for tenants who are dealing with an eviction? Do they have options for other housing?
In many cases, no, and I think that's where the stakes are higher here. We're talking about a vulnerable population who many people worked very hard to get stably housed, or in many cases off the streets. Charles Hart Jr. is facing an eviction from his Bronx apartment where he's lived for 14 years. He says his health issues caused him to fall behind on rent. He's also been complaining about mold in his apartment that worsened his health.
They forget that we have rights outside coming in these places for whatever reasons. We can't be looked at any less than human. We have to be respected, and we have not to get respected.
He says because many tenants have mental health issues, their complaints aren't always heard and are easily dismissed, but they also deserve safe and decent housing. Hart says that instead of getting the help he was promised and fixes to his unit, he got taken to court, and the landlord claims in his case that he owes more than $10,000. Another tenant, Kat Corbell, is also facing eviction and says her provider told her not to worry because the eviction was just what the city wanted them to do in order to get emergency rental assistance. But she says she doesn't think she should need to go to court to get the help she needs. She hasn't been able to count on her provider to help her, she says.
They had volunteer social work interns from a college come and lead coloring activities on a Friday, and that was the only version of support services that they offered to us. If I ever needed help, they would just always ask me to Google it, and it's like, then why am I even asking you for help?
In talking to these tenants, there seems to be a really wide disconnect between the services the executives of these nonprofits say they're providing and the actual execution of these services based on these experiences that I'm hearing.
What is the city saying about these evictions here?
Well, a big part of the problem is that they're sort of a patchwork of different agencies that contract with different providers, and that includes the city health department and the state department of mental health. So most don't really require providers to inform them when an eviction is filed. So there's really no citywide tracking of evictions in supportive housing. But now the Department of Social Services, and this is another agency, they contract for the social services part. They say they're looking into tracking this for the first time citywide. And they're considering tightening their contracts and tightening the language to specifically require eviction prevention measures across the board. To say, you know, show us you've done everything to help a tenant find a way to pay their rent before you took them to court.
That's WNIC's Karen Yee. Karen, thanks for joining us on this. Wow.
Thanks, Michael.
WNYC is supported by Jazz Forum Arts, celebrating its 40th anniversary with performances by Bill Charlap, John Pizzarelli, John Faddis, and Akep Nkwele at Jazz Forum Tarrytown this June. Details at jazzforumarts.org/WNYC.